But as they always say, you'll die of some other disease other than prostate cancer. But my stage 4, the odds are less than if you had ordinary prostate cancer that hasn't spread. Usually it's taken out, and they do it now through robotics in some hospitals, so not bloody at all. It's taken out, and then it could be gone, and even forever gone. Parang such as a remission, it's a cure. But if it's a spread, it can't be cured anymore. So I have to live with it. I have to, I do hormone therapy injections to suppress testosterone, so that it doesn't spread any further. Your life is suspended every 3 months because you have to be monitored. And if it's spread to other places, you have to be biopsied in that place. Like I was biopsied sa thyroid because the doctor saw something through ultrasound. But after biopsy, it found out it wasn't malignant, so we're just monitoring it. This was a month before the elections. I thought that it will be a tough election, and there was always that possibility.
Yeah, you were certainly busy. We were all lining up to guest you on all the channels.
So I figured that election week I'll be very busy with Viña work. And after that, if it was stands, conflict, I usually play a role of trying to calm people down and get some consensus for society. So, and then I have another, the one thing I did in the pandemic was to work with Lumad schools that were attacked by Duterte and help them survive those attacks. So the plan was after the elections to try to see if we can reopen, especially if Lenny won, we would be able to reopen some of them. If Marcos, maybe we can see. So the plan was to go to Mindanao and visit those schools.
This is the dream project that you keep posting about?
The plan to do that. And then, so I had a medical exam.
Scheduled.
Physically, some scheduled earlier, 4 months earlier. I usually have it in July. I usually do it kasi vacation. Di ba yung vacation natin ngayon is June to August. So, July ko siya in-schedule para malaman ko din with how many courses I could teach, how many schools I could go to. So, that was the plan. But this time, because of the elections, this project to rebuild Lumad schools, I had myself tested 4 months earlier and came out with the blood test. It's very shocking, Roby, because I felt healthy. I felt good. I had no symptoms. I mean, I have hypertension and diabetes, but they're all controlled. I mean, low dosage medicines. So.
And then when you hear it, na sabihin may cancer ka, and then after a few days, I imagine there's something more extensive, and they tell you now, it's stage 4.
The stages are first a blood test. So I had the blood test mid-April. The PSA, that's the prostate antigen, was 4.5. That's not bad because the normal is 4.
Okay.
And I've always tested 2 to 4. I mean,
so within range.
Within range. But 4.5 is a little bit. But I went. This Holy Week, I went the last visitor to my urologist in Medical City, and I said, what should I do? I said, usually we don't do anything. We just monitor for another round 3 months later. But I have a family history. My father had died of prostate cancer. So I said, go get a MRI. So the week after, I went for the MRI, and the MRI showed that there were lesions that could be cancerous. An MRI, pictures lang yun. So doesn't confirm anything, right? So the next step is a biopsy. So the biopsy was done, which is also just, they call it, machine guided. So you hardly feel anything. I had general anesthesia siya. So I had the biopsy April 30, 2022. It was confirmed that you have prostate cancer. So that alone, yun yung first shocking. The next step is to see whether it spread. So you have to do a bone scan. In my case, I had to do both bone scan and PET scan. Bone scan was inconclusive. PET scan showed it had spread already.
I know
we were-
you're always. I mean, you're and of course, we found out because you started posting about it. That for me personally, that only it just validated how we always thought of you. You're a man of faith. You're positive. You're an optimist. But in reality, between getting that shock, how long did it take you to say that no, I'm this?
I think a month. It wasn't. In fact, I did it because I also had to do an operation in the hospital. So to prepare for that, very important to understand what you were being faced with. When you're faced with a diagnosis like that, you and your family, my family was accompanying me, my wife and my children. You actually imagine, kasi stage 4, di ba? Na that means terminal na siya. That's what I always thought, di ba? Parang at the end, you're at the end of the road na. Kasi stage
there's
4
no
na,
higher
di ba?
stage.
Parang there's no higher stage. And when you do look at your own without talking to doctors, you look at like Google it and look at it. It seems to say that because it always says that if it's first or second stages, survival is like 90%, very high survival, and 90% for like another 20 years. I mean, 80% for another 10 years, things like that, right? But when you are stage 4, it's like half or 2/3 of that. So it can be anywhere from 1 year to 5 years. 10 years is a very high, very low probability already. So we thought that the doctor would say that, like, you have 1 year, you have 5 years. But he didn't. I have patients that have been faced with this for 10 years already, 15 years. So that led me to think that, and pray over it in that month before I came out, that and wrote about it, that this is not the end of the road, right?
Yeah.
In fact, as this went on the whole year, I actually see the cancer as a gift. It's quite an amazing gift to have this.
Yeah, I want to get into that, but before that, you look very good right now. I mean, what's gone on in the 1 year?
Well, there was one time I nearly died in the hospital, loss of blood because I had to be operated on, also because of prostate, but not related to prostate cancer. It's that enlarged prostate meant I could no longer urinate. And when that happened, the doctor had to operate for, it was said 12 minutes, so it's very fast. But unexpectedly, I bled a lot. So they had to code me. Code means, you're nearly dead and they're ready to revive you. In my case, I didn't die, but I was very low blood pressure, lost a lot of blood. The blood was all over the room. When I revived Father Jet Villarin, president of Ateneo de Manila, former president, my boss now in Manila Observatory, also my best friend in Manila, my wife had called him. He came in and blessed me, and he said it's the first time he had to do, anointing the sick and step around blood, because there was a lot of blood in the room. And when he went home, he stayed with my wife for a few hours until I was in the ICU and see him stable. But when he went home, he actually called our HR person in Manila Observatory to say, we have to prepare because Tony might die. And I mean, I was 1 month in the hospital. That happened twice during that month. Second time, a lot of pain, lost a lot of weight during the time.
Ano kababa weight mo?
Umabot ako na, basta mga 30 kilos na nawala, so mga 50, 60 pounds, which is a lot, no?
Yeah.
A lot. But I've gained most of that. I mean, mga 40 dyan, na-gain ko na. Well, you pay attention to what you eat, you pay attention to obviously more healthy living, di ba? Kasi yun na nga, my endocrinologist just said that, you'll most likely die of your diabetes, for example, than your cancer. And I mean, if you don't, that's why I consider it a gift, literally a gift, a physical gift. Kasi what I was always afraid of, Robbie, because of my lifestyle, which was very intense. I
Yeah.
mean,
But healthy.
before cancer, no.
No? Okay.
I was I knew how to eat and drinking not too much. I mean, and I stopped smoking quite a while ago, 15 years ago. But I eat well, too much red meat, too much processed and other. So but more that I work a lot, I travel a lot.
Yes.
I mean, before the pandemic, every week teaching in Cagayan de Oro and another city in the Philippines. Every day, 7 to 8 schools in Metro Manila. Well, that will be 3
Every
or 4
day?
schools. No, it will be the whole week, 8 to 9 schools.
Wait.
It will be the whole week for an 8 to 9 schools. So every day I travel 4 to 6 hours to those schools. Not all 8 schools, diba? Kasi you don't teach in all schools every day. But I travel, like I have like in Makati, I teach in University of Makati. I teach in Rockwell, Ateneo Rockwell. I teach in FEU, and I teach in Lyceum. That's 4 schools right in Makati. And I try to have them all in the same day.
And then
But it takes 3 to 4 hours going around those schools. I mean, even if they're in the same place. Physically.
Even during the
before
time?
this is before the pandemic. And then I became even crazier during the pandemic. Even more intense because I saw the pandemic as a chance to scale up my teaching. I really wanted to teach. I've always wanted to teach big classes and lots of people.
Sige, I'll pause you there. Hihimay natin lahat. Before that, we're speaking, of course, welcome to Roundtable with me, Roby Alampay po. We're here with Tony Viña, and ito pala, parang napakahaba. A lot of people already know you. A lot of people maybe take for granted that they see you on TV, they've seen your writings and so on. But essentially, lawyer, environmental expert, both on the policy side, on the legal side, educator, a professor, and I guess even in the teaching context, pwede mong himayin yun in many, many ways. Active in civil society, human rights, lawyer as well. So many ways that people know you. And then, eto nga, pinag-uusapan natin, you tack on that pa, as you said, and I think this is a word that you tack on to yourself many, many times in many contexts, that now part of your mission as well is to educate people about this condition that you have, the cancer that you have. I mean, where do you get that? Where do you get, never mind the time, but where does that come from? The energy that you have to be wanting to do so many things in so many areas.
I've always...
And is it a good thing?
Yeah. Yes and no. Because you can also miss some signals to slow down, to prioritize. And that's why I said the cancer is very important, because it did send me that signal. But in terms of where it's coming from, I've always seen my life as a mission. Called to do these things because of skills, family background, experience, education. I mean, the range of things that I considered as a gift to me. And my family was a very interesting family from Cagayan de Oro.
You mentioned Father Jet Villarin, your best friend. Did you also enter the seminary?
No, I nearly did. Though.
Okay.
I thought about it. It's in the memoirs about it's about the first 3 choices I made, and many of our generation. You're a bit younger than me, but you can see also the same. I had to choose career. So is it gonna be philosophy teacher, lawyer, which although included teaching? Was it gonna be armed struggle against the Marcos dictatorship, or was I gonna fight it peacefully, or maybe in fact run away and just go somewhere? And was it going to be priesthood or marriage? And I mean, I call them the early crossroads in my life that continue. I have to continue to make those choices up to the end, and all of which is about mission. I mean, what are you called to do, given where you are? So my family gave me this gift of freedom to explore things, that you can be anything. I mean, my parents were intellectuals, very politically minded. They basically told us you can be anything in this world. I actually wanted to go to UP Baguio for college,
Yeah.
but along the way ended up in Katipunan.
Why UP Baguio
It was so
specifically?
romantic for me, and I mean,
Ah.
I just thought, wow, studying in UP Baguio would be so cool. I mean, so whenever I go
Literally,
to Baguio, it's like, you know, it's just I guess I saw myself more as an artist at an early stage, and I thought in Baguio, like,
And did you actually decide on what path to take, or did things just essentially conspire to while you were still deciding that the reality is larger
no, I
forces
really
were
wanted
just
to go to Baguio, and I got accepted. I don't think I even applied to Diliman because I wanted Baguio. I got accepted in Baguio, and I was gonna go there. When I was a student leader in my high school, very conscientized. We were in the middle of a war, the war with the MLF at the time, and so and I was leading the effort in the high school to provide relief to refugees, etc. And so the Jesuits noticed me, and Father Ting Samson, my director of admissions in Ateneo, came and found out I'm going to UP Baguio. No, you're not going to UP Baguio. You're going to Ateneo de Manila, and here's the application, and you can write any course that you want. You know, that's one thing you always have to. That's a signal always, Robbie, which is that ego, di ba? When it's about your ego, hold mo na, di ba? Kasi baka mali ka, di ba? Not now. Ateneo was good for the right reasons later on, because I ended up with philosophy, love of my life, but I was so enamored with I could take any course, right?
No, but that's my point. That's
Getting
my-
economic honors ako. So I ended up in this course that I didn't understand. It was so difficult.
Yeah, but that's my point. I mean, beyond the actual choice of the school and the actual choice of the campus, I was talking about all of these labels that legitimately are associated with you. Philosophy, law, environment, human rights, climate change, you name it. But that's my point. Parang, did you actually decide?
No,
Because all of these are still with you.
Yeah, none of them is planned. So in that sense, they're not decided. But they come at crossroads in your life where the choices seem so obvious, right? So for example, so I started with economic honors in Ateneo, and I failed my math subjects. Like, you know, how can I even proceed? So no, it's very funny, and people laugh when I tell the story because they think I'm so intelligent. So you know, they think actually I'm a cum laude, magna cum laude. I didn't have that
Di ba?
because I failed in first year. I failed my math and my science subject, as in F, no? Including with Father Samson, who was the one who recruited me, but was my chemistry teacher, gave me an F. I remember nung first year ako, and pumunta ako sa academic advisor. So sa students, si Raul Montemayor, no? He's actually famous because he's an agrarian reform advocate. And I went to Raul, who was a fifth-year management engineering student. He was, I think, vice president sa Sanggunian. And he looked at my grades, and he was like laughing, you know. Three Fs. Do you think you'll survive the semester? I said, I don't know, but I said, mayabang din ako sa, they're all Fs, but my English would at least be a C. That's Sol Reyes, great professor, great teacher. She did give me a C, but in the second semester she gave me B and D plus, so which is very high grades for Professor Sol. So I was very proud. Got very high grades always in history, theology. So hindi ako na-kick out sa first year. But second year I was in economics, and I was just lost. And then going to third year, just before third year, I said, this is crazy. I'm studying something I don't like. And then I discovered philosophy. And at the time when philosophy majors, when we shift to philosophy, many of us would shift to philosophy. What's your reason for shifting to philosophy? We put actually, I saw the light. So I did this, and I saw the light. And Ateneo Philosophy Department then and now have the greatest teachers. And I mean, Father Roque Ferriols, you know, Dr. Ramon Reyes, Professor Ray Visunico, Professor Francis Riley, Thomas Green. These were like giants. I mean, So, grabe, na-open talaga yung mind ko na, and I fell in love with philosophy. And in fact, then taught it for 10 years
Yeah, but then in
before
the
I became a
context,
lawyer.
I mean, but just trying to imagine you as in college, in the context of what you said, the context of those times, di ba? 1970s, martial law, pinag-iisipan mo, mamumundok ba ako, di ba? Do I go to the mountains?
That's where law came in.
But where do you say that, okay, nag-iisip ako mamundok para, okay, philosophy appeals to me. How do you come to that?
Kasi nagtuturo ako ng philosophy, una sa Xavier University, then sa Ateneo de Manila. But sa Xavier University, I had students who challenged me on my thinking, which was at the time nonviolence, peaceful resolution of disputes, let's be rational. And I would have students who said my family was massacred. I had a student who was who had just been released from political detention and, had taken up arms and I guess was ready to take up arms again. And every afternoon he would come to see me in my room and maybe was trying to convert me or just to argue with me. And we argued, and that kept me thinking that maybe this society, it was very bad, if you know our history, the late 70s and the 80s were very bad. There was a dictatorship and people were actually being killed. I mean, in my island series of killings, Edgar Hobson was a hero for us Ateneans. Alex Herculio, very famous, both a journalist and a teacher. And then, of course, Aquino eventually. And I was already in Manila then, and I thought that maybe at that time there were two armed groups, plus of course the Moro armed groups. They were always there, but there were the National Democrats, Communist Party, NPA, and there were the Social Democrats also. Many of them I knew because I went to school with them. But I was actually attracted already at that point more with the National Democrats and the New People's Army. Not for anything else, but ang dami nila. Compared to parang wala namang chance atang mananalo itong mga Social Democrats against the Marcos regime. Di ba? Well, the communists had successfully, di ba, at the time, grew especially in Mindanao, leaps and bounds. The movement have begun. So I seriously considered taking up arms.
And why didn't you?
Why didn't I?
Yeah.
Just as I was about to make that decision, there was a purge of the Communist Party in Northern Mindanao. Because if I joined the armed struggle, I would have done it in Northern Mindanao and not in Manila. But I would have done it in Northern Mindanao. Suddenly, all the people I was talking to all of those years, people I was relating to, were disappearing. Some were arrested by their comrades, some were killed, some were the ones doing the torturing and the killing. And this is all recorded already, even by the Communist Party itself. So I'm not maligning them when I say that. And there's records on all sides of what happened. I will not pretend to know what really happened, except that this was happening and armed struggle didn't seem to be very attractive at that point. More positively, I started in the struggle against Marcos. I started seeing people like Pepe Joc, no? Heidi Yorak was a professor in UP Law. And that got me thinking that maybe this is another way of fighting the regime, just to do that. And there was this big case involving Lino Broca. In fact, it went to the Supreme Court, Broca versus Enrile, where a group of people were arrested with Lino Broca and Bien Cervantes, and they were arrested in, I think, in Cubao or Quezon Boulevard. Two people I knew were arrested. You know one of them, Howie Severino, who was a high school teacher. And my other friend was my roommate in Ateneo, where I was teaching philosophy, si Al Alegre. Both of them were arrested there. So in solidarity with them, I would attend the hearings. And it was fantastic watching. Heidi Yorak was the main lawyer for the defense, for Lino Broca and everyone, including my friends. But he was surrounded by all these young lawyers. I mean, Arno Sanidad, William Chua. William Chua, for some reason, I really like William Chua. So sorry he died quite young, but truly became my idols. I mean, of course, Heidi Orak was godlike, diba? Literally like a Greek goddess of justice, But these young lawyers around Heidi, flag lawyers, really inspired me, and in particular William Chua, the way he just comported himself. So I want to be that person. I mean, I'd like to be that person. So that's when I went to UP Law to apply. They were all UP Law graduates in that group of flag. I mean, very young at the time. And I applied to law school for that. And funny thing is, 1 year after law school, Marcos fell. The dictatorship fell. But I already enjoyed law school and loved law school and met people like Justice Marvic Leonen, who was the presiding officer of our student organization called the UP Paralegals. So wala na, parang sold na, lawyer na lang ako kaysa magrebelde. Parang, to be honest, parang mas madali at ang buhay na ito, di ba? But just as effective. Kasi yun naman hinahanap ko, impact ang hinahanap ko. And I realized, especially for someone like me, I asked a good friend of mine once na was in the movement, akyat na ako. Sige na, kahit na 1 week lang ako doon, tinang ko talagang He refused kasi sabi niya, you will endanger everyone. Sabi niya, una matangkad ka. Pangalawa, yung mistiso ka, which I reject. Hindi ako mistiso. Pero matangkad ako at malaki at maingay, di ba? So sabi niya, ay nako, yung mga kasama mo, lahat mahuhuli kayo, mababaril kayo lahat, di ba? So,
liability ka.
Liability lang daw kung pumunta ko sa bundok.
Apart from, I imagine that courtroom and all the names that you dropped there. But apart from seeing essentially role models there, in a scene, diba, that really crystallizes a vision for yourself. What did that impress upon you in terms of, this was still Marcos years. Technically, wala nang martial law because 1981 lifted na, but this was a year before or so.
There's no difference between 1981 and 84.
Yeah, but what did that impress upon you, seeing Heidi Orak and the young people of Flag arguing nonetheless in the Supreme Court? When even to this day, people assume na
in fact, it was not in the Supreme Court, Robbie. It was in the regional trial court with Judge Miriam Defensor Santiago. So you can imagine, Heidi Orak, Miriam Defensor Santiago at 40 years old, already certainly knew the law. She was a really great judge, independent, even if, Marcos had appointed her protege of, I think, Justice Secretary Abad Santos, but she was very fair and defied Marcos too kasi she ordered the release on bail of Lina Brocan and others. So sa akin, majesty of the law yun. Parang,
exactly, and that's what
pwede pala, parang, that even in the midst of martial law, even in the midst of a dictatorship, diba, that you can actually fight back. You don't always win, and we saw that Pepe Jokno lost a lot of cases. We've lost a lot of cases, but that you can resist, and then sometimes you win, and that carries with me. I mean, in my memo, I will link that to later what happens in the Duterte time. I have clients, Senator Laila de Lima. I'm collaborating counselor, 6 years there now, but we'll get her out. I can feel it in my bones already. I have another client in Dumaguete, student activist Basil Basil, 5 years already. Many human rights lawyers have that experience. That what's important is you fight, you use all the means that you have. The statement is made, and then you've done your best, and wow, many times you actually win. I always thought that Marcos would be there forever. We would never win against Marcos. I always thought the U.S. bases as we knew it, there's EDCA, but EDCA, I tell people, is not U.S. military bases agreement. They were really there in the tens of thousands, and those bases were theirs. They treated as their territory, right? So the U.S. bases I work in the field of indigenous peoples, you know what I mean? And it's very bad. The Lumad are attacked, and the Lumad schools have been closed, and you know, all of that has happened. But I actually remember too when they were just massacred left and right as well in the 70s. Well, I think now we have a fighting chance compared to where in the 70s. Now there are also years that were better, you know, in some administration. So it's this. I mean, I think our history has been said so many times. It's not linear. No, I mean it's more circular, where we end up in a better place than the next time. You know, we don't see the progress if we're just living in the moment. But because I teach this, for example, I teach constitutional law. The cases I teach starts with Carino versus Insular Government. It's one of the first case that's a 1909, early 1900s case where the U.S. Supreme Court, acting as the highest court of the Philippines, actually said indigenous peoples own their land. They're not owned by the state. And that is so relevant even up to today. So I have that ability to tell my students that history vindicates, you know what I mean? But always to be vigilant, because it doesn't also mean that even if you win, if you're not vigilant, you will win forever. My students get a ringside view, because sometimes in the middle of the class, I would have a senator call me. I would have media interview me, and and with their permission, I'll make them listen in, as long as it's not a private, confidential, and they see that the law that I teach, constitutional law or environmental law, which is the other subject that I teach, it's live law. And when you see it's live law, there is no certainty of the result and of the outcome. It depends on you. It's in your hands. The outcome is in your hands. I tell my students, right? Freedom of speech.
Yeah, but
if you're not going to defend freedom of speech, it will be taken away from you. So you have to defend it, and you have to be vigilant about it. You have to fight for it. That's what you have to do, because that's what it means for law to be alive. There is no certainty of what the outcome will be, because it depends on the actors, the protagonists. Because law is always about power.
Exactly, and in the latest chapter, especially of our history, under Duterte for 6 years, I remember having this not argument, but this conversation with Dick Gordon on the Chiefs, and he said exactly the same things. No, parang you have to fight for it and so on. And I said, you're making it sound like we haven't. You make it sound like people haven't been standing up. But the reality is we've been standing up, but we're looking at our institutions. It's the institutions and the people we voted in there who are not standing up. Parang civil society speaking out, the media speaking out. But let's face it, nakakatakot talaga si Duterte in those 6 years. We were seeing institutions being undermined and crumbling and so on. And we were seeing our political leaders not taking up their side of the bargain.
Not just political leaders of industry and business, even the church. Even
in media. The reality is we were
exactly. So the lesson there is, you have to push people in those institutions earlier to take a stand. Because if they don't do that, in fact, then a president in the Philippines can get away actually with anything. No? So of course, the one thing kasi we did not anticipate and we're not able to plan for there is the extent of disinformation that will be used, so that the people en masse would side with Duterte, even if it's a very twisted way of governance, right? Because that's the one that made the other institutions wary that they could not fight this guy because
you were not backstopped as well by media.
By the people, because I think there was enough critique from media at the beginning, like normal presidents, right? But Duterte or his people might not very well have been him. I mean, he was the natural for it because he's a populist, but the people around his social media were able to weaponize that to basically sidestep traditional media, undermine institutions so that they could not respond to what Duterte was saying.
But the point, I guess, is
that's why we have to,
the question, I guess, is after all of that, you still fall back on this confidence and this faith in the law that
but it's not a naive faith. In other words, I know we can be defeated. I know that when Laila de Lima finally walks out of the stockade, I can't say court because even if she's ordered, she'll go to the stockade first. So I promised her, whatever the condition of my health, I will be in the gates to embrace you and welcome you back. But the truth is, I'm not gonna be ecstatic. She shouldn't have been in jail at all for any of those 6 years,
take that
right?
back.
So, and you can take that. But because of the way she's comported herself, that those 6 years for her has truly been character forming. I mean, I think there's something to that will have an impact not just on her but on society as well as she comes out of that. But we will still have to deal with the disinformation that will also be hit against her. So I was going to say that that became very clear to me as we went to the whole 6 years of Duterte. Why can't we fight him? Because they're better at getting popular opinion on their side, right? And why can't the military? There's lots of decent people in the military. Why can't they fight him on China, on
China Sea,
China and on the war against drugs, because they knew the war against drugs was done illegally, and lots of killings were done illegally. But of course, Duterte bartered the peace process for that, right, to the military. You can have the communists, let me have the drug addicts, and I mean that's how I saw the exchange between the two, and that's very sad for the military to have agreed to that barter, including allowing China to gain so much advantage, right? So, but why was Duterte able to succeed that? Because whether as I said, he was the perfect person for that without having to do anything himself, right? But the people around him, or some people around him, or some of his supporters, which I still really, names have been mentioned, but I don't want to mention those names. I really don't know who were the masterminds of all it, but they were really good at shaping public opinion.
Yeah, on the matter of public opinion, I also think, it's just a personal theory, that I also think it's also a moment in time, not just for the Philippines, but the whole world. Not just information, but the entire information and news ecosystem is so disrupted. And the reality is you can characterize the free press any way you want, whether they're courageous or chilled. But the reality is, in this disrupted ecosystem for information, the gatekeeping is no longer with us. Diba? And I think in this moment in time, it's not a coincidence that all of these populist despots are sprouting out in all, because, but part of that theory for me is that this is a rare flowering, if that's a fair term for populist despots. It's a rare flowering for populist despots precisely because of this perfect storm of disrupted information and discontent.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a handle on this. I mean, and we saw that one of my hats, my newer hats, is I'm a founder and president of the Movement Against Disinformation. Outside of media groups, fact-finding groups, we are really the leading and probably the only, group that's fighting disinformation in a, aside from media and fact-finding groups and those groups that are really are formed for this purpose. But we are the accountability group. I mean, and looking for all the various ways we can fight,
Yeah.
Disinformation, trying to understand that, and using, we filed cases in the Ombudsman, in the PRC, in the Supreme Court, lately in the National Privacy Commission, in NTC. So 5 already venues, and more are coming. Because our base members, we have members that are from all disciplines, including from media, but a very big core group of us are lawyers. And so we think accountability and how we hold accountable, and not just the purveyors of this information, but the platforms that allow them to flourish. So our latest case is actually against Meta. In the case of Kong Corrales, the red tag journalist from Cagayan de Oro, my hometown. So I'm not sure we're gonna win, but for sure we will be fighting, and if we lose here, we will find other ways to fight, because you just have to do that.
Napapangiti ako because I want to ask, has cancer slowed you down at all? I mean, I've been listening
Actually,
to
yes.
you.
And this is actually yes. The teaching has slowed down. It reached a peak on the first year of pandemic. So before that, I was teaching 10 in 10 schools. At the height of the pandemic, because you didn't have to leave the house. Sometimes I moved places when I was just there. I just moved from one screen to another, right? I was doing 20 schools. After that height of 20, I'm now down to 6.
Yeah.
And probably will reduce that further to around 3 or 4. I just basically now have UP, which I like because that's where I come from. If I ever have to give up on my teaching, UP will be the last I would give up. I've actually given up Ateneo because it's just too far away, Rockwell, from QC, and they require face-to-face already. But I teach significantly still in Mindanao schools and in Bicol on Saturdays. But I realized I can give up teaching because in the last 2 bars, I realized all over the country, literally I could say I have 1,000 new lawyers that I had taught in the last 5-7 years.
You said kanina, among other things that all the hats you're wearing, all the missions that you've taken upon, you said that in the last elections, and seeing how passionate it was on both sides, if not many sides, you said you were looking forward, anticipating the results. You were looking forward to be, I forgot your term, but to be
consensus builder.
Yeah, to consensus
That
builder,
if there
to
was
cool down.
conflict, how do you cool down people?
And how do you think it's gone? Since I mean, you could basically bookend your last 5 decades with fighting a Marcos, and then
I have a book
Marcos,
that's coming, Marcos Senior to Marcos Junior.
Diba?
Essays on the Bill of Rights from
so how do you feel?
martial law to now.
As somebody who was thinking, until this diagnosis came, that I'll play this role, and I think you always have been every time we guest you.
No, I'm a consensus builder, even in my technical field of climate change. That's what I'm known for.
How do you feel about the environment now?
I think it's bad. We're better off than we were during Duterte. The negative side of it is that Marcos doesn't seem to be as engaged in day-to-day governing as his predecessors were. But the positive side of it is that the general principles that he announces are, you can't question them. They're motherhood statements, but I like a president who says we will follow human rights. Put that even in an EO. That's the EO which the Secretary Lorraine Badoy has been screaming that it abolished anti-FLC, which it doesn't. Marcos was just recognizing that the labor sector has been oppressed in the Philippines and human rights violations has been happening, and he wants that corrected. Statement on the war against drugs. He definitely has appointed the best, in my field, the best environmental and climate change officials that I've ever seen in any presidency. The premise of trying to build consensus is that not only that there's conflict, because there's always conflict in society, but that conflict is at the center of the functioning of society, which I thought was going to happen if it was a closer election. But since it wasn't a close election, that didn't happen. So I didn't feel I had to do that. I mean, so it's one of those things that you might be called to that, but it's actually not necessary. There were other things more important to do. And in that case, as you asked me earlier, I actually thought I could do this dream project in Mindanao of rebuilding the Lumad schools that I really think the Lumad schools, from the way I experienced it in UP, in Cebu, and the way I've seen it in different places all over Mindanao, is really the hope of Mindanao and even the hope of the country. Because it's not just about the Lumad indigenous people, that itself is already good, but because they're about the most marginalized. Diba? If you're able to address your educational gaps, which usually means also the other things that marginalizes them, then you solve many of this country's problems. You know, why were those Lumad schools built in the first place? Because without those Lumad schools, those children would be walking 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day to get to their school, because no DepEd school are within a few kilometers of those schools. No DepEd teacher will volunteer to teach in those schools that are so very far away. And my experience in the UP Backwit School, where many of the students came during the pandemic, and many of the teachers and administrators, I met them, they were really just the best of the
Tony,
best. Quite amazing.
In some of your posts, that given your situation right now and your priorities right now, you said, it looks like I will have to take a step back.
That's an example of the signal. Diba? I said, you have to watch the signal, and it's going to be, if I pursued this effort, right? Which would have been it was a collective effort. I had people that I work with in the Lumad schools that we were, just amazing group of people. I said, and I would even say the most amazing group of people I've worked with in the last 40 years in engaging here. If I pursue that, given my health, which means I can't go to the schools themselves, right? Because that takes 3, 4, 5 hours of walking to go to the schools. I would have raised the money to do this in the hundreds of millions, I'm pretty sure. Someone asked me, that's why it's called a dream project, because someone asked me, what is the most audacious thing you want to do that you want to fund you with? And I said, this is it, right? And I can bring a group of people together that are very experienced in doing this, and we can do this. But I'm needed there because I'm the senior person, I'm the one with the experience, I'm the leader and the mentor for many of them. And I just realized that I couldn't really do it. This was just, the context is, this was a year after we started doing this, even after I have gotten my diagnosis, preparing for it, writing concept papers, discussing with the core groups that I was doing, putting that together, some of the first money together. I was in a catheter doing that. I nearly died. And then 2 weeks after I nearly died, I asked my partners to come to my house and let's move on and discuss this, right?
Exactly. But now you talk about a core group, you talk about partners. And
because you never do this alone.
Yeah, exactly. And how gratifying is that for you to be able to say that at this stage in your life, and we're still saying that there's still a lot of years ahead of you, but notwithstanding that how gratifying is it to now say that as a teacher especially, to now have the confidence that I'll have to make a pragmatic decision for myself, but this also comes from a confidence.
Yeah. They can go on, and they might do it slower. They'll have to do it slower. You know what I mean? I told them I will support them in whatever way they need me to. This is multiple Roby, because the schools have been so under attack. So many of the people I work with have been red tagged. Some have been killed, like Chad Book was my client in the UP Backwit School. Some have trials on trump-up charges that are going on. So this was going to be both educational, but also providing human rights sanctuary. It's a multiple effort. You know, I mean, this was about climate justice because these schools were right at the center. In other words, I was trying to see if this was a way of putting everything. Well, it was a synthesis of my life, right?
Yeah,
A
exactly.
synthesis
It's you. Everything
to
everything
get
comes together.
Get there, and
If you could make it happen, everything comes together, which I think is very Tony Laviña, if I may say.
but then God has other plans, and God tells you,
Yeah.
sorry, wag muna. I'm not saying, and in fact, I told some of the group today, because I had a meeting with some of them about transition, and I said, I actually think we might be able to do this in 2 years' time. I just have to be, I'm actually healthier a month from when I made that decision. But that's the point. It's so uncertain, di ba? In June, I will have my next monitoring with my urologist with all the tests. And it will tell me, it will tell me whether I will die or not. It just tell me that you might have to go to radiation or chemotherapy. You have to take off 1 month. That uncertainty just, and I just didn't want to do that, especially with my main partner who was one of the teachers and one of the executive directors of the biggest network. I didn't want to do that to that person and just leave it to her to deal with it. So, with consulting with her and the other people, I said, I think it's just, but it's very painful. It's like it has a hole in my heart, because it's like, this is the last thing I wanted to do. But it's a gift. I consider it a gift. Now I can write my memoir, and I think it will be a good memoir.
I asked this of your best friend, Father Jet Villarin. I'm curious how you would answer. How do you pray?
Mainly through quiet, solitude. I've always been a person of solitude, believe it or not. I find times, I call it alone time. I find alone time during the day. Even sometimes in the middle of a meeting, I can actually shut down and pray the Jesus prayer. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I always do a retreat every year, 8 days, 10 days, 5 days. When I go on trips, I always take 1 or 2 days off for pilgrimage just to pray, either by myself or sometimes my wife would join with me. I've done a 30-day retreat, like all the Jesuits do, and not too many lay. Some lay people do that now. I have done that. Before I did this decision, I did an 8-day retreat. So preparing for it, it was an interesting retreat because the prayer was not about, I have to choose. The prayer was, Lord, if you will want to take away this dream project from me, help me to accept it. I didn't know. It would come very soon. Soon after pala that retreat, it would come that I would have to make this decision. But let me share this because I think it's important to share with everyone, especially for us that are very busy. The pandemic, diba, change our habits, diba, change our habits, and many of us learn to sleep earlier, wake up earlier, no. So that actually meant for me I have more time for prayer if I wake up earlier. I always try not to work before 6 or even before 7. You should take breakfast at 7. So before that, if I wake at 5 or 4, I usually pray. But here's where again, sickness becomes a gift. Because when I was in the hospital, remember I told you I nearly died 2 times in the first 2 weeks. After that, I got stable already. My condition was stable. But the doctor said you have to stay here for 2 weeks because we can't afford you to go home and then bleed again. So we'll have to observe you for 2 weeks. Now in the hospital, they wake you up every 3 hours for vitals, right? And the last hour they will wake you up before breakfast at 6 or 7 is at 4 in the morning. Hindi na ako makatulog after kasi I already slept like 6 hours, no? And my wife stayed with me in the hospital all the time, but at night when things were stable na, she would go to the hostel, and it will be my boys. I have 3 sons, all adults, who would rotate in watching over me. But they're just sleeping. There's no need to watch kasi okay na ako eh. And it was a beautiful sight, Robbie, watching my kids that I had watched over me. These kids whom I had watched over many times when they were in hospitals also. The sun is rising at 5 in the morning. Just the best place for prayer. Since then, this is August 21 when we left the hospital. I just do that, 4 hours of prayer every day, waking up at 4 in the morning. 3 hours, kasi by 7 I do have to take practice and start working already. And the prayer is spontaneous. I mean, I call it the 4 gestures. No? Because of my cancer and because of the really bad things in this country, I always remember for broadcast we can't use bad words like, but these bad things happen in the country. The first prayer often is protest. I mean, I protest. Diba? Hindi ko ito matanggap. Hindi ko matanggap na may sakit ako. Gusto ko talaga gawin itong dream project na ito, di ba? Ito yung life end ng project ko. Bakit tatanggalin mo sa akin yun, di ba? I will say that, di ba? Bakit hindi handa yung team ko na gagawin ito na with me, no? So yun yung isa to the protest. Protest the country. I mean, up to now, di ba? The things that can happen. There are 2 missing activists now that we're still looking for, and I protest that. Talagang inaaway ko yung Panginoon. Panginoon, bakit, di ba? My wife was saying once, ba't mo inaaway yung Panginoon? Ano ba yan? Kristiyano ka ba kung gano'n? Si Christ nga inaaway si Panginoon, di ba? Na about the cup in Gethsemane. So sabi ko, pwede naman siguro siya awayin. Basta huwag ka lang matapos doon. Then the second gesture is one of petition. Sige na nga, tatanggapin ko na lang ito. Pero pwede bang tulungan mo ako dito? Pwede bang tulungan mo sila? Itong 2 aktivista na nawawala. I mean, si Clem at si Dex, di ba? Bazu at si Dex. Pwede bang i-surface sila? Kahit nasaktan sila, basta wag lang masyado, basta buhay sila, di ba? So petition, di ba? And then the third movement ng prayer ko palagi, this is every day. Every day talaga siya. Nararamdaman ko. The third movement ko palagi is one of just love, di ba? Para bang, kasi nagdasal ka ng gano'n, humingi ka sa Panginoon na yun, may sagot siya sa'yo, mahal kita. Maybe I will not give you exactly what you want. Maybe I will not give you your dream project back, di ba? But here's your memoir, and that will help other people too. Believe me, itong pagsusulat ko sa cancer ko, at least 5 times a week, sabihin natin. Hindi man every day. 3 to 5 times a week, I have individual letters that come to me, PM, WhatsApp, Signal, whatever it comes, diba, sa different ways we communicate to each other now, thanking me because a particular thing I said or wrote helped them in their own cancer. Mostly men. And then, so the third is this love that you are loved even if you're so imperfect and so sinful. And that's why the last prayer always is praise, diba? I call it Laudato Si prayer, where I have your arms and stretch because, diba, who am I that God chose to love me this way and gave me this gift to be able to love and give others. So parang when you have that, everything becomes a gift.
We've been speaking with Tony Viña. You will have to leave, but before you do, please catch us again next Thursday. Join us 9:30 p.m. Manila time here on One News. And then if you don't catch it here, or if you just want to watch it again, you can also check it out wherever it's streaming, The Long Conversation on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and yung audio rin po nito, i-upload din po natin sa Puma Podcast where I'm also involved. You can search for Puma Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or kung saan man kay Puma Podcast. This is Roundtable with Roby Alampay. I'm with Tony Viña. We'll speak a little bit more. Thank you for joining us.